So in short, my name is Rachel, and I am traditionally trained as a registered nurse, and then I trained as a midwife in 1990, and I worked as a clinical midwife and registered nurse for 36 years. Ended my career abruptly at the end of 2021 as a manager. In about 7 years ago, I was struggling with some health issues, and so I was looking for some solutions, and I found the root cause protocol. That's a protocol that specialises in balancing minerals using hair mineral analysis and blood tests to get to the root cause of the disease. But it very strongly focuses on reducing the stress, physical, mental, environmental, and metabolic. And so while it is important to have good nourishment and that sort of stuff, and to read the mineral and the stress mosaic on the body, reducing that stress is the key point of the root cause protocol. So I quickly studied in that. And during that time, biomagnetism came into my perspective. And so in 2021, I studied online. The COVID event helped me with that. And then after doing over 12 months of level 1, COVID was still in full swing. And so I asked Lisa to give me some tips and hints on how to begin to include some level 2 training while I waited for Helena to come to Australia. And I've just recently been trained by Helena in my level 2. So my case study today is going to be basically a case study on a client of mine using level 1 with some mixed in of a few bits of the level 2 that I was able to begin to employ as I waited for my training. The thing that I want you to know is that I'm coming to you as basically a level 1 practitioner. So I'm standing here in the presence of such mighty talent as a little tiny baby biomagnetism therapist. But the fun thing about it is my mum was a midwife that trained in the 1950s. And when I did my midwifery, she said to me, don't worry about the abnormal. The normal will, just worry about the normal, and the abnormal will look after itself. And I think that came true for me with biomagnetism, because it really struck true, is just do a scan, do a full scan, and don't worry about anything else. Don't look at, like what Helena says, is don't look at the symptoms that they come with, just do a full scan, just do a full scan. And really, it's the magnets in the client's body that does the magic. So this particular story is a beautiful story. It's called The Unlikely Client. Press down. It's not going to work. So this is a story about Karen. Karen and I met years ago when I asked her to come wash my dogs. We would talk about life and the family as she washed the dogs. And one day, she uncharacteristically shared an overwhelming health concern that I didn't even know she was suffering with, and I offered to help. Karen is a 63-year-old lady living in Brisbane, and for many years she ran a busy mobile dog hygiene and grooming service. Her parents were 10-pound POMs, and many of you might not even know what that is. You're nodding, Ruth, and a lot of Aussies will know. In the 1950s, after the Second World War, Australia opened up for immigration from the UK for anybody that wanted to come, and it cost them £10 to come. It's a bit of an interesting story because they weren't well received by Aussies. But anyway, so her parents came as 10-pound POMs. Unfortunately, her dad was quite abusive, and 3 years later, she and her mother escaped back to the UK. When she was leaving, her father told her mother, if she was a boy, you'd have a fight on your hands, but you can take her. She did catch up with her dad again when she was 29, and it was incredibly traumatic. So why is Karen the unlikely client? Well, Karen wasn't actively looking for biomagnetism. She'd never heard about it. Her approach to life was simply to love and to give in spades. Her significant health concerns did not unsettle her as much as it would another soul. In true British fashion, she just said I'll suck it up and put my best foot forward. She didn't complain. She didn't talk about it. And when I heard about it, I was quite shocked that she had so many things going on for her. So I offered her the biomagnetism, and she said, all right, I'll give it a go. So Karen's early medical history, interestingly, and this was not lost on Karen when we talked, when she arrived back in the UK, she developed epilepsy, petit mal seizures, which she had until she was 16. Her early childhood was peppered with doctors' visits and specialists, and she was bullied a lot as a child. Interestingly, when she was pregnant with her first child, she had one more seizure and never again. Just for a bit of context, she married at 24. Her then husband worked away, and she had a very domineering extended family. Her first pregnancy happened in 1920, when she was 26, sorry. And the baby actually had to have an exchange transfusion. And that didn't seem extraordinary to Karen. And it was like, really? That's so rare, especially back then in the 80s. The birth was very traumatic. 13 months later, she had her other baby. She lost her best friend traumatically when she was 29. She was 29. She divorced, remarried again at 32, and then relocated to Australia at 43. That's one of my dogs. Now, her adult medical history. At 34, Karen had a total abdominal hysterectomy with a salpingo oophorectomy, which means they took out all her tubes and ovaries. After 3 years of excruciating endometriosis. She couldn't tolerate HRT. She tried some evening primrose oil, and after a little while, she just gave up and put up with things. She had frequent respiratory infections. She developed hypertension and hypercholesterolemia, and she was commenced on antihypertensives and statin drugs. She also suffered from restless leg syndrome, insomnia, and she developed gluten and lactose intolerance. With all of that, she soldiered on, as you do when you're British. So her current story. So this was the day that I met Karen, and she began to uncharacteristically open up. 2023 saw an avalanche of stress from multiple sources that even Karen couldn't manage. She developed severe muscle aches all over. The doctor investigated and found her CK levels were through the roof. She was sent to specialist after specialist. One of them charged her 500 Australian dollars to be told there's nothing we can do. She was investigated for rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, and on and on. Finally, after a muscle biopsy, she was diagnosed with necrotizing myopathy, which is caused by the statin drugs she was on, less than 1% of the chance of that. Necrotizing myopathy causes weakness, pain, and fatigue, and is characterized by signs of necrosis or cell death in the muscles. The doctors told her there was no cure for this condition, only medical management for the rest of her life with high-dose steroids and sometimes IG therapy. The doctor urgently ceased her statin drugs and prescribed high-dose steroids. Karen didn't want to take the steroids. She'd seen other people on steroids. She didn't want to be on steroids. She didn't know what to do. On top of that, her 88-year-old mother, who was living with her and had done so for 20 years, was developing dementia. Unfortunately, the dementia was escalating and was at the conspiracy stage, where life at home had become incredibly difficult. There was unnecessary fights, and her mother was an increased risk of harm to herself. But oblivious to the condition, she thought Karen was just being difficult. And so the environment was toxic. Her husband had to have both knees replaced, but the doctor had suggested doing it one at a time. And he would have to be off work for an extended period of time. He's a taxi driver, and she would be required to give him a lot of physical assistance. Karen was looking forward to a cruise, the one thing in 2023 that was going to be a pleasure. They'd met friends several years ago on a cruise, and they cruised every year together. Several days before the cruise, her phone rang, and she picked it up only to hear her friend saying the most horrible things about her, berating her, saying how she couldn't stand Karen and how she was going to manage the cruise in the company of such a horrid person. As it turns out, this friend had accidentally pocket dialed Karen during this conversation. That's very weird. So the next day, she was booked to come and wash my dogs on the monthly basis. And that's when the whole story came out. And Karen told me all about what was going on. When she came the next day for biomagnetism, she told me that she's never told anybody some of the things she's told me. Just so you know, she has given me permission to tell you this today. So the first scan, on the 26th of the 2nd this year, Karen came in a complete tailspin. High blood pressure, high CK levels, necrotic myopathy, restless leg syndrome, insomnia, body pain, recently discovered of her friend's betrayal and her mother. I forgot to mention also she fell backwards while pushing her dog wash back into the ute, or the, what do you call that? Yeah, it's called a ute truck. She damaged her back and was unable to work anymore after a little while. That was also in 2023. So I've just put in there just a basic outline of the scan, 14 biomagnetic pairs, including Guillain-Barré and Epstein-Barr. The emotions of hate, depression, and malice came up. That was one of my first ones for that. Remember, I hadn't done Helena's full training at that stage, which is a shame. So when I asked her body, I asked Karen about, I told Karen what malice meant, and she knew instantly that it was this lady that did the pocket dial. And I asked her body, and so it was. And so she had a cry, and we balanced that. And then afterwards, the next day, she felt much better. She was still quite teary, but she was feeling not so intense with that. She had a pounding head. On top of that, as a root cause protocol consultant, I recommended that she take some adrenal support, some magnesium. She'd brought along all of her pathology for me to have a look at, and she had subclinical hemochromatosis, and so I recommended that she get some urgent phlebotomy, which she did do. So she returned on the 5th of the 3rd. She informed me, and this again is where this tough British nature, she'd suffered all week with a headache and abdominal pains on and off, but she hadn't let me know. So she was hoping to get rid of that headache. On the flip side, since leaving my place, she had been very calm and sleeping well. So this event with her friend, and in fact, she confronted her friend and they'd had a good talk. All the muscle pain was gone. So we got 10 biomagnetic pairs that day, a couple of good ones, and we also got a couple of level 2. The headache eased after that the next day and over the next 3 days. I also recommended that she do some EFT for the acute on chronic stress that she was suffering. She was living with her mother, who was daily causing extreme stress in the home and tension between herself and her husband. We discussed starting to switch her diet over to more nutritional foods and ancestral eating and magnesium. So a little while later, she contacted me again to say that she was continuing to have high blood pressure. She told me that the tummy pains she'd had been much better. Now today she was contacting me because she had a sore right shoulder, and could those magnets do anything? She continued to have sleep problems. I said, yeah, sure, come on over. So over she came. 16 biomagnetic pairs this time, including the heavy metals, continued to be an issue for her. Their sessions were really intense, and trying to get Karen to be quiet was quite the challenge as well. And so I'd think to myself, I really must talk to her about, you know, her environment. And we began to do that. But being the unlikely client, it was very hard. I had to go slowly, and she wasn't very engaged. You know, she, oh yeah, do that. That's great. And off she'd run, sort of thing. So I'd slowly introduce different concepts and things like that. And she, oh yeah, yeah. So she had the emotions of guile, envy, and Electra this time, which was interesting. She had a massive week with her mum post-session, so much stress and anxiety. Her mother was cancelling aids and assistance and bringing people behind Karen's back and doing things that were incredibly stressful and counterproductive. Scan number 4. Her shoulder was much better. Now she was complaining of a cramp in her chest, and she simply presumed it was the CK thing and she'd need to put up with it. But I'd said come back the next week because it had been a little while. And so she came back, 7 biomagnetic pairs. And during the session, Karen noticed that when I placed the reservoir pair, she had one, pleuroperitoneum, she felt like her stomach literally jumped out and grabbed hold of the magnet. And then we were accompanied by a huge symphony of gurgles and rumbles. When she went home, she reported that she spent the week on the toilet, and her husband was suggesting that she might like to use a different one because of the offensiveness of her stools. She did manage a joke, and she said, if this is how you treat your friends, God help your enemies. So scan number 5, she returned with muscle pains and a tug in the colon from that massive week and very loud stomach rumbles. 13 pairs discovered at this particular point. And when I put the radius pair on, she had extreme shooting pain up her arm. So much so I offered to take it off, and she battled through because she's British. And then the emotion of impatience was discovered. After the session that night, Karen continued to experience quite bad pain of her right arm, but the next day it resolved, and then she had a feeling of extreme well-being. So Karen got a cold and aching muscles, feeling flat and blisters all throughout her mouth, and the stress was indescribable. So she came back, 11 biomagnetic pairs this time. I got 2 coronavirus pairs, emotions of guilt and hate. Post the session, she reported a rumbly tummy and was feeling meh, she said. But then the blisters resolved, the cold resolved quickly, and all the aches and pains were gone. She returned with the hamster wheel of stress continuing. So we were sort of getting somewhere, and then she'd go home. Again, she's not sleeping. She's tearful due to the issues at home, and her blood pressure is now sky high. 6 biomagnetic pairs, emotions of arrogance, avarice, and anxiety, and 1 personal pair. During the session, Karen's headache escalated so much that I offered to take the magnets off so she could stop the session. She didn't want to, and I got her an ice pack. The next day, Karen reported that the headache subsided. And by the 8th of the 9th, she was feeling much better. She still felt flat at the end of the day, but nowhere near where she was like. For her insomnia, I also suggested she weave in a product by Jigsaw called Mag Soothe, which has got magnesium, potassium, and sodium bicarbonate in it. It's a very good one for supplemental sleep. She slept through, and now she's emotionally attached to the Mag Soothe, whether or not it works. It's her placebo drug. If the bottle's getting empty, she's like, got to get that stuff. Then on the 26th of the 9th, she returned, and her BP is now the lowest it has ever been. Now, she did go back to the GP because it was very, very high, and she did get put on medication. All her bloods were normal. The doctor couldn't find any abnormalities, and her CK levels have returned to normal. No muscle aches and pains, and the headache's all gone, and the restless leg syndrome is absent, which is fantastic. 10 biomagnetic pairs this day, including seizure activity. That was the first time that came up. And the emotion of envy. Karen cannot believe it. It's taken her 8 sessions to turn into a believer. She states now that she has a new look on alternative therapies. I reinforced the need for some EFT and something to help her and pop in her tool belt that she can use every day to deal with her mum, because this is going to be an ongoing situation for her. I reached out to Karen last weekend and just said, hey, could you pop round? Because I'm actually going to be doing that talk, which she'd consented to, and it'd be fun just to do another session on you just to see if I've got more that we could say. I did a complimentary session. She, of course, rushed around. Her blood pressure is amazing, continues to be the lowest it's ever been. She continues to stay on her medication, which is wise. 6 biomagnetic pairs this day, just 4 special pairs, just doing some cleaning up, I think. I actually got to do some extra testing on her as opposed to just first aid, really, and full scan, of course. And she came up positive for environmental allergies. And this is the first scan I've had to do on her since doing my level 2. So I was so hopeful in a way that she would have some of the, that when I asked her body did she really want to be healthy? I was hoping she would say no, and she said yes. But anyway, never mind. Next time. Karen has two large dogs, and they sleep on a blanket on her bed. So we talked about strategies as well as for reinfection. And so she was going to give that a go and see if that made a difference. Karen feels great. She's telling everyone about biomagnetic therapy, which is good because she's a dog wash lady, a retired one now, but she does do the occasional one on weekends. So that's good promo for me. And she's put her foot down with her mum, and who's consented to go to the doctor, and hopefully there will be services and respite around the corner for this family. So what has biomagnetism done for Karen? I asked her this last Sunday. I'm now a believer. I didn't think too much about all this sort of stuff, but now I can honestly say this stuff works. I have found it very grounding. It's also been very enabling. I am now learning to listen to my body and recognize its needs and cries. I also now feel like I have control over my healthcare, and I know what to do about it. That there are great options available to me, as opposed to just having to take the cortisone and suck it up bravely. So the big wins, to recap: no symptoms of necrotizing myopathy. Obviously, she'd have to have a muscle biopsy to confirm that, but we don't necessarily need that. We just know that she doesn't have the symptoms. The high CK levels are down, so that's a good sign. No restless legs. I sleep like a dog, she says. My aches and pains are mostly all gone. I have energy and vitality. She's continuing with extra RCP support and suggestions, regular phlebotomy, magnesium, adrenal support, ancestral diet with retinol, and she's yet to do EFT, but she's promised me she will. So in summary, that's me and Karen last Sunday. We hold the keys to transform the lives of those we care about. Sometimes all it takes is a moment to connect and listen, allowing them to share their incredible story. Biomagnetism is a powerful tool that we have all experienced firsthand, and now our journey involves spreading its remarkable benefits so that others can discover its healing potential too, even the unlikeliest of clients. How'd we go? Good. I zipped through that so that there'd be time for Ruth. Maybe I went too quickly. Any questions? Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Just scrolling backwards.
Well, you're really good at doing presentation. That was beautiful. A good case study too.
It is amazing, isn't it?
So Rachel, how long did you take with the whole process for the 9 sessions? Like, because they were not regular, basically. It was basically kind of on and off. Or they were regularly, because I don't remember the dates.
Oh, so yeah. Karen's just been, it's an unusual and an unlikely scenario. That's why I thought I'd do it, as well as the fact that she actually had what I would consider really extreme health conditions, and she didn't think much of it. She felt bad for complaining and bothering me with her condition. She'd come back obviously with continued stress and more inflammation because of what was going on in her, so many moving parts. So to actually condense the session, and it was level 1 as well with a hybrid while I was waiting for my level 2. Wow. But yeah, I started in February, if that's what you also mean, and then she didn't need to come back last Sunday, but I just thought I'd call her back and give her a complimentary session just to see if there was anything else that I can find for today. There wasn't, but you know, there was things to do.
So it was more or less like one therapy per month, more or less.
I guess, yeah. But she'd come in like 2, and then she'd disappear again, and then she'd message me and say, "Hey, I was really sick. I was just thinking, would your magnets help that?" Sure, yeah, come back.
I'm just wondering about the blood pressure. Is something that she's able to kind of reduce medication because of after the therapy, or is about the same medication?
She wasn't on medication when she first came. She had a history now that was the doctor wanted her on medication. She didn't like it, so she took herself off. And then I think with all the stress, what was going on at home, the blood pressure escalated. I'm a nurse, so I did take her blood pressure on one of those. I didn't put in the presentation. It was way too high. If I was in a hospital, I would have called a met call or a code, not a code, but a medical emergency. And I told her she needed to go to ED, but she didn't. So she said she'd go home and take one of her pills. And she did. And then she promised to go to the doctor, and I followed her up that week, and she got on the medication. Going forward, it'd be fun if we could see if we could balance that. But I think until her situation with her mum is resolved, I think that, and if she can get some wraparound therapy with some emotional release techniques of some sort, you know, I think that what needs to happen.
Yeah. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Could have been a combo of all that above. The biomagnetic pairs of gateway to all of that for her. Yes. Lisa, that was a fantastic case study and really well collated and presented. Thank you. I wonder what percentage of her healing comes from the biomagnetic pairs, from the growing friendship and the other therapies. But then I hear that her biomagnetic open her up to all of the above. Yeah, that's why she's the unlikely client, because as a root cause protocol consultant as well, I understand and why I do biomagnetism, because it addresses the stress that's in the body. And that's why I wanted to do level 2, so that it could also help with the trapped emotions and help to bring relief to everybody. And I love the RCP, and that's what I do as well. But I always refer to biomagnetism, as Lisa knows, because I send, and Helena, I don't know if anybody's ever told you, I send people to you too. So if they're not close to a therapist, I send for distance.
Yeah, because in her case, you know, when you are under a lot of stress, that could make you sick too. You know, stress is the #1 cause of things. So if you're under stress, biomagnetic pairs are going to start showing up. So yeah, you're doing really good, because you're helping her not just with the biomagnetic pairs, physically or energy, but also making her aware that she really needs to deal with her environment too.
Yeah.
So it's a process. It's a process in this case, because she has a lot of outside, you know, external, but also internal toxicity, meaning, you know, affecting her tissue, like the emotions she's going, the stress. But it's amazing that she accomplished so much just in a few months. So good job.
Thank you. I was worried that it's taken so long, thinking, oh, it's because I'm only level 1.
It's just taking long because she's under stress.
I wondered if that was the case.
Stress, it would have been faster, but as long as you are exposed to toxicity, internal or external, the body is going to keep acting up. Biomagnetic pairs are going to be created. So, you know.
And reducing the immune system, because they're reducing the immune system because of the stress.
Exactly. Yeah. So those take longer, because it's not like they just outside of where it was affecting them. No, they're still ongoing at some level.
I wondered that because it was quite a lot of emotional pairs and repeat pairs. Carotid kept coming back, and I'm like,
So she gets getting activated. The biomagnetic pairs start forming again. I mean, you clear them, but if she's exposed to that, again, she's going to get, you know, it's kind of like if her issue was because there's some, I don't know, something in her house, is eating or drinking. You heal it, but she keeps drinking the same thing and making her sick, the biomagnetic pair is going to come up. With emotion is the same. Or situations that are stressful or conflict with anyone. If, you know, if you keep going to work and you have the same crap happening with your boss every day, you end up, you know. So considering all that, I think you're doing an excellent job making her understand that it's important to be aware of that and also addressing those issues. So yeah, good.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think she's getting it. I've got to do that EFT thing. I'll get to that. I love the way.
Good. Just keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing a good job, obviously.
Well, now I've got the level 2, so I can.
Now you can do all that too. Yeah.
That'll be exciting.